Well, I got to tell you, this time of year, as we always prep for the show, one of the things we like to do is keep the listeners informed on what's going on. What are consumers curious about? What are they asking about this time of year? Mm-hmm. And I was at an event earlier this week, and there was probably 50 or 60 people there networking and talking about different industries. And, the question I got over and over again was twofold. It was, number one, what's the inventory look like? I feel like I'm seeing a lot of signs out in the market, Lance.
Okay.
And then the second question was, this time of year, as the leaves are starting to fall off the trees and turn, are homes still selling? Mm-hmm. And so there's a couple different things to look at in that situation. Number one, we're just coming off our biggest month of the year. So October was extremely, extremely busy. Now, some of that you got to go back and look and say a lot of that was work that was done in September and then closing in October. But that momentum has not stopped or slowed down. And so right now, this time of year, the next 2.5 months, we start to become heavily, I will say, dependent upon where rates are going, what's happening with interest rates, and then also what's happening weather-wise. So I looked back at last November. And, after I think back to these comments this week where people are like, man, there's a lot of signs out there. So I looked back at last November. And last November, the headline was that we have the highest inventory we've seen in the last 10 years, and it was 1,000 homes on the market. So fast forward to today, and the reason why people are saying they're seeing a lot of signs out there, we're now at 1,250 homes on the market this November. So 250 more homes, on the market, and roughly 230 to 250 a month are selling right now. So all of a sudden you look out in the market and that's another full month of active inventory. So a lot of times we look at a balanced market between the number of months supply. When that reaches 6 months supply,
it's balanced.
Is what we call a balanced buyers and sellers market. And right now, based upon last month's under contracts with the active inventory that's out there, we're approaching, for the first time in a long time, almost a 5.5 month supply of homes.
Ooh.
Very, very balanced market. And so that is a difference we have not seen in a number of years. So when you look at that, what happens behind the scenes? What are some of the things in those adjustments that start to happen, especially when we're going into the holidays? So the first thing that we see happen is we see changes in the closing and escrow process. It's taking a little bit longer to close, but it's not necessarily for the traditional reasons you're thinking. So the first thing that I wrote down is that as a seller that goes into escrow, you have to be prepared to make repairs. See, what was happening just, 2 years ago is somebody would go under contract and they're like, boom, done deal, sure thing. We're going to make it to closing because I had 2 or 3 backup offers. I had all of this interest. So I'm not really concerned about anything.
Yeah.
Well, now the condition of that home during inspection, we're now seeing inspection. It's not uncommon to see inspection requests that are multiple pages, where it used to be like 1 or 2 life safety things.
Yeah.
The outlet is sparking when we walk by it. So
Okay.
we're going to fix that. Or, the water, you turn on the faucet and water sprays you in the face, hot water. So we're going to fix it. Now it's like latches on doors aren't working. Outlet covers are cracked or broken, and we need to replace those. Dumb stuff that was throwaways before are now making their way onto inspection requests. And you have to, as a seller, be willing to look at, as time on the market, days on the market are starting to get longer, as time on the market goes up, you have to be looking at making some more of those repairs. So the negotiation is not over at the initial offer. Some other strange things that I'm seeing in the market that is making things different. And I had mentioned this a few months ago, and it hasn't gotten any better. So it's likely here to stay. Technology changes what happens in the home sale process. And I got to tell you, one of the biggest technology changes in the inspection process that we've seen is the cost and availability of home inspectors to do sewer scopes.
Ooh.
And this, we started to see this pop up, 7-8 months ago. And then all of the sudden, now it's almost common. It used to be like 1 or 2 inspectors in town would have a sewer scope. And now it's almost common that every inspector will offer a sewer scope because the price of that technology has come down. It used to be hard to get a 200-foot sewer scope camera line. And so, it'd be thousands of dollars, 10, 50, only 1 or 2 companies in town would have them. Well, now they've got the cost of those down so much cheaper that the home inspectors can afford to have that technology. The camera's better, the views are better. Here's the problem that you run into as a seller.
Okay.
Mr. and Mrs. Seller. When you bought your house 6 years ago, that technology was not available. Mm-hmm. So you likely didn't do a sewer scope. And so like we had one just 3 weeks ago where we're running the sewer scope down there. And all of the sudden, halfway through, there's a grounding rod for the light pole next to, like running like at a 45-degree angle through the top third of the sewer line. Okay, well, that is not normal, we shall say. Like we don't normally see that. Here's the hard part about an issue like that. Had the seller didn't have any idea that this was in there. Also, they had no negative effects, right? Like they hadn't had their sewer back up.
Nothing.
It wasn't playing the house. Like it was kind of on the top corner of the pipe. So, I mean, it's going to have to be pretty jammed in there. But that is a major defect. It's not something a new buyer should just be like, there hasn't been any problem. We're just going to let it go, because problems like that normally don't get better. They get worse. Also, there's probably a certain amount of leakage coming out of that at certain times, into the ground. So you want to get that fixed. Well, that's a hard repair for a seller to make, right?
Yeah.
Because it's probably an $8,000 to $10,000 repair. You got to dig up the side. This particular one was in the sidewalk. So now you're in a city right away. You got to get a city right away permit. And they're trying to close on this property. And then who's going to pay for that, right? Like the seller didn't put the rod through there, the grounding rod. It was potentially the contractor for the power company that installed the light pole. Maybe it was the city. Anyway, there's no way they're going to get somebody to pay for that. Seller ends up footing the bill for that to get that to close. I would say, 6-7 years ago, even 4 years ago, on a newer construction house like that, people weren't doing sewer scopes. They're like, oh, it's new construction. Well, they're like, let's do one in North Richland where there's a bunch of big trees in the front yard and we think roots are coming. Well, I tell you what, it's not just for that anymore. So we're starting to see different types of inspections that we used to not be able to see. Another big one is heat source from electrical panels. A lot of the inspectors now are able to use a heat gun to determine if there's any hot spots around the electrical panels, and also use that same technology to determine if there's any insulation deficiencies that are allowing heat to escape from certain parts of the house. And so it's almost like the inspectors are being able to literally look through walls now. And so when they do that, they are finding things that we weren't able to find 3 or 4 years ago. Also, there's more homes on the market. People are a little more picky and they can ask for more things.
Yeah.
So as a seller in this market, I will say you have to remember your negotiation is not done when you sign the initial offer. You've got to get through that inspection and appraisal process and likely be prepared for some additional negotiation.